If we'll open up a few playlist pages, we will notice that the list of lessons that is shown in here will be the same for each playlist. And that is because all those lessons are currently hard-coded inside the component responsible for showing list of lessons. And in this lesson, we're going to make the list of lessons dynamic so that each playlist page will show corresponding lessons that belong to that playlist. So let's open up page component that is responsible for showing the playlist page. It is called playlist component enclosed in the square brackets. We're basically fetching playlist from the address line and passing it into getPlaylist by method to fetch particular playlist from the playlist store by its And to get rid of this type error, we can explicitly state that playlist will always be a string. And just to handle those cases where playlist will not be found by the playlist we're going to check in here if playlist has not been found. We're going to throw an error with the following options. The error code will be 404, and as for the message, let's use playlist not found message. So let's try it out if this error handling works as expected. I'm gonna open up playlist page, and then let's change the of the playlist in the address bar. I will use a random which does not exist, and when we refresh the page, in this case we're getting this error screen with the message that we have previously specified, playlist not found. So our logic at this point works as expected. Next one, in order to show different lessons on the playlist page, we'll have to pass lesson identifiers into playlist lessons component, and then from within playlist lessons component we'll be able to fetch lessons by their identifiers from the lesson store and render proper list of lessons. So I'm using lesson IDs prop in here and pass all lesson identifiers that are contained inside the lesson IDs property of the playlist. As a reminder, if we'll take a look inside the playlist store and check the structure of each playlist object, we'll see that each object has lesson identifiers property. So all those identifiers of lessons are going to be passed into playlist lessons component. I'm actually going to define lesson IDs prop within playlist lessons component. So let's use define props macro and specify prop called lesson identifiers, which will be an array of numbers. And then we'll have to pass these lesson identifiers further into lesson list component, also as a lesson IDs prop. If we will open up lesson list component, in here we can see that list of lessons is hard-coded, and that is why each playlist shows the same list of lessons. Let's change this, but this time we're passing all list identifiers from outside as a prop. So let's declare this prop in here, lesson IDs, which will be an array of numbers. Down here we'll need to access lessons store since we're gonna fetch lessons from this store. And in the template where we are rendering list of lessons, let's access that list from the store by using lesson store variable. For now we are receiving some type errors related to lesson objects in here, and that is because if we'll take a look inside the lessons store and check what the lesson object looks like, in here we're not seeing the number property that we are trying to fetch in the component. For now, to fix it, let's do the following. I'm going to define another interface right here that will be called numberAddLesson, which will basically inherit all the properties from the lesson type, plus it will define one more property with the name number that will be of the number type. Now let's open up lesson list item component, which expects lesson property to be of the following type. But because we have defined a separate type for it called numberAddLesson, let's replace this type with a newly defined type numberAddLesson, which already has all necessary properties. We don't need to import this type explicitly since Nuxt is going to do this for us. Let's go back to lesson list component and fix remaining errors in here. The lesson variable is treated as an object type without number property. So let's say explicitly that this lesson object will be of the numbered lesson type. And since lesson objects defined in the lesson store do not contain number property, let's use ID property as the key in here. And before passing individual lesson objects to the lesson list item component, we're going to do some transformation. So let's declare a computed property right here, because we'll have to transform each lesson object and add number property in each lesson object. First of all, let's fetch all the lessons by their identifiers that we have received from outside of this component as a lesson IDs prop. We're gonna reach out to lesson store and call getLessonsByIDs method, which is not defined yet, which will accept list of lesson identifiers that we need to fetch. And we're gonna go over each fetched lesson and transform it in some way. Specifically, we're going to add one more property into each lesson object with a named number. So all we have to do in here is to destructure the current lesson object to get all the properties of this lesson, plus we're gonna add one more number property, which will basically be the number of the particular lesson. All the lessons will be numbered from the first, so we'll have to add 1 to the index, otherwise lessons will be numbered from 0. So we still have to define this getLessonsByID function inside lesson store. I'm gonna switch over to this store and define this function, which will accept an array of numbers as a param. And right here we're gonna reach out to lessons reactive variable to filter all the lessons by identifiers that we have received as a param into this function. We are checking if the current lesson identifier is included in the array of IDs that we have received as a param into this function. In that case, we'll have to return this lesson in the resulting array. And this way we're basically grabbing only those lessons with required lesson identifiers. As always, we have to expose this function in order to use it in components. So let's add function name into this object. And we are basically done. Let's just fix this issue inside lesson list component. This property is called lesson IDs and not lessons IDs. So what is happening in here is the following. Firstly, we're fetching lessons by their identifiers from the lesson store and then mapping over all those lessons in order to add another property into each lesson object, which will be the number of the lesson. And eventually in the template, we're going to reference that lessons computed property to iterate over those lesson objects that already have property number that we will need inside lesson list item component. And now we don't even need to mention that this lesson object will be of a numbered lesson type. It will be determined automatically. And that's pretty much it. If we'll open up the browser and check the list of lessons, we can see that now each playlist will contain different list of lessons, and each lesson will have number in front of it. So when we are opening up individual playlist page, at the beginning we're fetching list of playlist lessons by their identifiers and then rendering those lessons in the left panel. Link to the source code of this project will be in the video description.